Have you ever noticed a number that just seems to follow you? You see it on the clock, a license plate, maybe a receipt. Well, today we're diving into this really fascinating manuscript that makes a pretty wild claim about one specific number, 717. It argues this isn't just random chance, but a hidden spiritual frequency.
So, let's get right into it. The whole idea here is built on one central conflict. Is the number 717 just a random string of digits our brains happen to notice, or is it something more? A deliberate signal with a very specific and very ancient meaning.
And this really lays out the two sides of the coin. On one hand, you've got the critic's view. 717 is totally arbitrary, it's just a coincidence, something you could see anywhere if you're looking for it. But the manuscript's view, completely different. It claims 717 is a spiritual frequency, a prophetic marker that holds what it calls numerical authority.
So to really unpack this pretty complex idea, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to explore the number's supposed hidden meaning, then trace it all the way back to its prophetic anchor. We'll get into the conflict between the prophet and the usurper, learn how to decode this so-called spiritual radar and see how it's meant to be used, and finally, we'll look at its claim as an ancient marker. All right, first up, a number's hidden meaning. To really get what the manuscript claims 717 is, we first have to talk about what it claims it isn't.
The manuscript actually gives a name to that skeptical viewpoint we just talked about. It calls it the Assyrian mind state. It defines this as a way of thinking that just boils everything down to coincidence, completely missing what it calls the divine authority behind the numbers. It's like seeing the sign, but being blind to what it's pointing at.
Okay, so if it's not just a coincidence, then what is it anchored to? Where does this all come from? That brings us to our second section. You'll see the entire theory is tied to a single, very specific verse in the Bible. And this is it. This is the foundation. Everything comes back to this one passage, Isaiah chapter 7, verse 17. The manuscript isn't treating this as just a story from the past, but as a kind of timeless, spiritual coordinate. So the real key here is how the manuscript breaks this verse down. That phrase, Ephraim departed from Judah, it sees that as the exact moment a unified tribal frequency was shattered. The arrival of the king of Assyria is read as the entry point for a usurping force. And so 717 becomes like a siren, a blaring alarm warning that this usurpation is happening right now. And that whole idea leads us straight into a spiritual showdown. The text frames this as a battle between two key figures, the prophet and the usurper. This is where the manuscript's logic gets really interesting. It takes the biggest criticism you can throw at it, that you can see 717 anywhere, and it flips it completely on its head. The rebuttal isn't no, you can't. It's, you're right, it's everywhere, because the Assyrian influence is everywhere. Now, this spiritual battle is said to take place in what the text calls the universal field of operations. Just think of it like a spiritual battlefield, a domain where the frequency from Isaiah 7:17 is always active, constantly marking the presence of this usurper. So what's the weapon in the spiritual field? The spoken breath. The manuscript describes this as pure divine authority itself, the creative power of God said, which can be used to pinpoint and even reverse the usurper's influence.
Okay, that's all great, but how is this number actually supposed to work? I mean, what's the mechanism here? That brings us to our fourth section, decoding the spiritual radar.
And it's a pretty direct metaphor, right? Within this universal field of operations, the manuscript argues that the number 717 isn't just a passive little marker. No, it's an active system, a kind of spiritual radar pinging away. And here's how that radar supposedly breaks down. It's a sequence. The first 7 is the warning, that loss of unity, the split. The 1 in the middle, that's the pivot, the prophet figure who stands in that gap. And the final 7 is the judgment, the arrival of the king of Assyria, which the text claims is meant to force everyone back to that divine spoken breath. Now, according to the manuscript, this isn't just about identifying a problem. It's about giving you a solution. So let's move on to our fifth section and see how this all comes together in practice, reversing the yoke. So what's the actual strategy here? The source is super specific. The point isn't to just wander around looking for the number 717. Instead, it's meant to be used as an active tool to, and I quote, triangulate the location of false teachers. The logic is that if someone's message vibes with the frequency of Isaiah 7:17, then they're basically reenacting that same spiritual departure. And here's the playbook for how to reverse it. Step 1.
You use the spoken breath, that divine authority, on the spiritual coordinates of Isaiah 7:17. Step 2, you call for unity to be restored, framing it as bringing Ephraim back to Judah. And step 3, you relabel the king of Assyria not as some divine agent of judgment, but as a simple trespasser.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together. What is the manuscript's ultimate claim about where this all comes from? That brings us to our final section, an ancient prophetic marker.
You see, the biggest argument this entire document makes is this. The 717 frequency is not some New Age idea or a modern interpretation. The claim is that it's an ancient system, a prophetic marker that's been in place since the moment it describes.
And this quote, right from the source's own notes, just sums it all up perfectly. It calls the Isaiah verse the legal precedent for the 717 alignment. The whole point is to prove, within its own logic, that this frequency is an ancient prophetic marker that pinpoints the exact moment this spiritual usurpation first kicked off.
So, at the end of the day, we're left with this huge question. Is the 717 frequency a genuine ancient prophetic code, a key to unlocking a hidden spiritual conflict? Or is it maybe a powerful example of our own minds, how we're wired to find patterns and give them incredible meaning? The manuscript we've walked through has its answer, for sure. But the final verdict? Well, that's for you to decide.